And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Chartered the Golden Age. Now, I didn't know a lot about this, but I did see that Wolfgang Kramer's name is on the box, and technically he didn't design this. He designed a game called Big Boss, which this is based on. Big Boss is actually Wolfgang Kramer's take on a very famous game that you may have heard of called Acquire from Sid Saxon, which I didn't know all that until I set up Chartered and we started going through it, and I was like, this has a very strong Acquire feel to it. Well, yeah, it's very similar to that. This is a stock market game where you are building in the city of Amsterdam and building different warehouses and building companies, connecting them and buying and selling stock. Here's how it plays. The object of this game is to have the most money, woot! And you're going to do that by buying and selling stocks of various companies. Those stocks are going to be kept track of on another board here. All companies, when they first start, are going to start at 30, and they can go up, but whenever you buy stock, you will pay a minimum of 50. But when you sell stock, you'll sell whatever the current value of that stock is. Players are going to be playing on one of two sides of the board. It all depends on how many players in the game. The other side here is a smaller side of the board. And in fact, you won't use every card in the game. The cards have some different colored backs that you'll pull out if you're playing with less than 6 players. And players are going to start with a handful of cards, and many of these cards are going to correspond to different spots on the board. And the cards go from 1 to 60, and then if you're playing with some extra spots, some of the spots will have a B in front of them, and you can see here on the board where they are. On a player's turn, and players are going to start with some cash and with some cards, you have some different options. One of the options is to buy new cards. So next to the board will be 3 face-up cards in a draw pile. You can pay 50 to take one of these cards in your hand, or the top card from here. You can pay an additional 50 to discard these 3 cards, draw 3 new ones, pick from one of these and this, which would cost you a total of 100. If you do that, that is your entire turn. Players can also play a card from their hand and find that spot on the board. So here's B19, and I'll take one of the warehouses included in the game and place it on that spot. Now, when you place that on a spot, you have a few things that you can do. One of them is you can start a new enterprise. If that's the case, I'm going to pick one of these enterprises over here. So let's say I pick the blue one. I'm going to take this blue one, put it on top of the one I just placed, and then place 2 more warehouses out. So maybe I can do this on one on both sides, or I could put 2 on one side like that. As you build new enterprises, they have to be at least 3 away from something else, and obviously can't be adjacent to another one. So instead of starting a new one, you can add to one that exists. If I drew the number B17 and that's already out there because you put out 3 when you start something, I could put it just on top of that. And if you play cards that increase levels, so most of the cards in here show numbers, but there are cards like this that says put a level 3 out or put a level 4 out. 3 has to go on top of a 4, 4 has to go on top of a 3. So I could do the 3 here, and then if I have a 4, put a 4 on top of it. And that's a way to expand the board. When you start a company, you'll put a marker for that company on the 30 because you put out 3 warehouses, 10 for each. It starts on a 30. Each time that you add to it, you'll add it, except that when you add the double level, it will go up 2, and the triple level goes up 3. So you can see the price of the stocks will go up as you expand it. And in fact, at the end of a player's turn, they can sell or buy 2 stocks. Remember, when you buy them for whatever the price is. When you sell them for whatever the price is. Unless they are lower than 50, you still have to buy them for 50. Players can also buy a stock of sorts by buying a flag in a company. You put a flag of your color in that company. It costs you 200, but essentially counts as 4 stocks of that company. There are only 9 cards for each company in existence, but a flag can count as extra stock, but each player only has 2 flags. When a player places a piece that it merges 2 companies together, first of all, you're going to pick which company that 10 is added to in value, and then the larger company will absorb the smaller one. And if there's a tie, you decide which one happens. So everyone who has stocks of the smaller company, so in this case, let's say it was yellow, You would sell all your stocks of yellow for the current price. Then you would add the value of the yellow company to the blue company. This yellow company would be basically removed from the board, replaced with a normal warehouse here. And then the yellow company can be built again. It can come out again in the future if players want to start up another company. And that is essentially it. Players are going to be going back and forth until all these warehouses are on the board. When that happens, the game is over. Players will sell all their stock. Whoever has the most money is the winner of the game. There's also a set of event cards that you can play with that will do various things to different stocks if you want to add a bit of randomness to the game. Component-wise, each player has a little sheet here that tells you essentially how much it costs to put out your first and your second flag. So the second one, by the way, costs more money than the first one. It also shows you the board layout, so you can look at this rather than stare at the board. Especially when buildings are on the board, it might be hard to see what numbers where. This is kind of useful for that. This also explains each action in a very convoluted way. I don't think this was very helpful at all. The rules themselves are okay, but because they're very obviously translated, I found them to be a little difficult to figure out. I had to go online just to clarify a few things. The buildings themselves for each company, there's a sticker that goes around them, and I found that that did not fit on very well, at least that I found. And I don't know, I just wasn't a big fan of how that looked. The companies themselves are whatever, they're just different colors, different material goods, and the flags that went in them. The whole thing, I thought, I mean, these are neat, these buildings, but they had almost like a cheap feel to them, at least for me. Now, at the end of the day, I really like the idea of buying and selling stock. It's something that I enjoy in games, and sitting there trying to figure out the best time to buy stock and sell stock. And the idea that Acquire presented, which was building out physically the company and showing it like a sprawling company that then sweeps smaller companies in, bringing in their value into that company, that's a cool one. In fact, I like Acquire. You can see my review of it. I think it's weird, you know, we usually try to look at games somewhat in a vacuum, but you can't look at Chartered without talking about Big Boss. Again, I haven't played Big Boss, but that's being based on Acquire. So it's weird to not mention this without mentioning Acquire in the same breath. And because I like Acquire, I came into this saying, okay, I'm, you know, one of the most amazing designers, Wolfgang Krummer, what's he going to do with it? And at the end of the day, I feel like it's just not as good. It's okay, you know, as you buy it. And again, the very boring looking board and, like I said, the cheap pieces. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's fun to stack these warehouses, but it just, nothing about the game looks exciting. So I need something, you know, I want that gameplay to be exciting. And there's some interesting moments in the game, but at the end of the day, it almost feels the same as Acquire. Like, the only difference is you can build up in this one a little bit. And that feels not that interesting, and I'll come back to that in a second. There's another problem with that. But it felt like there was a little bit less freedom in this game because you had to follow around these roads while Acquire is a grid and you can spread out amongst the grid like a spider. Here, you're more stuck as a centipede. As this game goes by, it becomes, once these companies start growing, it becomes harder and harder to find a new place to start a company on the board. And they're like, when a company gets swallowed, they're like, you can start that same company again. But that doesn't mean anything. You could, all the colors are the same. There's like no difference between these companies. And that just, it felt more restricted, which some people may enjoy more. I prefer more open-ended freedom. The other problem is with the randomness. Now, randomness is always going to be a thing in these games, and I don't think randomness should be eliminated from these games because randomness is a good thing. I won't play with those event cards. They're just, I don't need more randomness. But the problem is those level 3s and level 4s add a ton to the stock. And so if I buy a card and then the next one that pops up is the 3 level, I'm like, oh, well, there you go, Susan. That's yours. Now, that I don't like. I do like, you know, there's a number 20 that connects to, and we're like, who's going to draw it? It's, you know, we're looking for it. And I might even be sitting on it like, well, those businesses are never going to merge. Now, you do lose money at the end of the game for each card in your hand, but I will do that sometimes just so my smaller company, which is doing just fine, thank you, can grow a little bit and maybe even take over your company. That part I really like about this game a lot. Again, that part's also an acquire. So the components don't excite me. The restrictiveness of it felt a little tight for me. And I don't know, the randomness of those cards just bugged me a bit. That being said, I certainly know, I saw that recently. I saw this was on someone's top 10 games of all time list. Some people really enjoy this. These are well-renowned designers who worked on it and made it into a different thing. It's just a little bit too different for me, and it takes away from the freedom and the just straight up almost not perfection. I'm hesitant to call any game perfect. I don't even think Acquire is perfect. I think there's problems with it, but that game worked for what it was, and these changes don't seem to be something that I get into. At least not for me anyway. But you may love it. Check it out. That's Chartered the Golden Age. I'm Tom Vasel. We'll see you next time. Dice Tower Judgment, it's okay, but I'd rather play Acquire.